Three, two, one, go. Hello there, people and listeners of the Hungry Podcast. Today, I am beyond thrilled to welcome KEIR, CARNIE, Jamie LAING, and Ed Williams onto the podcast. KEIR is the founder of a plastic-free, plant-based chewing gum brand called NUUD. NUUD have won listings at Co-op, Waitrose, a whole host of indies. Jamie and Ed are the co-founders of Kittens, who are very much, in my eyes, kind of an OG challenger brand. They've won listings at all the major supermarkets. Ed and Jamie have recently set up a kind of incubator and investment platform called Tuckshop. KEIR and NUUD are the first brand on that cohort. So guys, I am super excited for this, and thank you so much for coming on today.
Woohoo!
Thank you very much. What an introduction.
Morning, Dan. Thanks for having us.
No worries, mate. So as I was saying before we hit the record button, I've always wanted to have like a big brand on the podcast, and in tandem with that, have a kind of a buccaneering brand like yourself, KEIR, who's up and coming. And I think because I just think there's so much in that for listeners. There were kind of a few different diving boards we could jump off to start this conversation. But the one I want to go down first is, in doing research for this, Jamie, I heard that your dad, Jonathan, was quite a big mentor in kind of getting Candy Kittens up and running. I kind of want to use that as almost like a microscope to understand the early days and the genesis of Candy Kittens. So first question is, how did Jonathan kind of galvanise and pour gasoline on your entrepreneurial spirit? First question. And then bolstered onto that is like, what lessons from Jonathan do you impart onto KEIR as he's embarking with NUUD?
Well, there's a couple of things here, and Ed will be laughing to himself at this. And Ed can also say what he thinks as well. Two things. Firstly, Dan, the hardest thing in the world in the podcast is to do an intro. So congrats on that, especially when everyone's staring at you as you do it. It's really hard to do. But secondly, Jonathan would probably drown himself if he thought that I was his son. I'm his stepson, so he's actually my stepfather.
Whoopsies.
But I suppose, well, for my own personal journey or whatever with Jonathan, is that so I was this hyperactive ADD child who no one could control me in lots of different ways. I would lie, I would honestly steal things. I was getting in trouble at school. And I sat in a car journey with Jonathan going up to London once. And this is when I was about 14 years old. And he spoke to me about his business. And I was always interested, weirdly, in money, because I didn't understand the concept of it. I didn't understand that this transactional thing, I didn't understand how that worked, because I was, 8, 9, 10 or whatever it was, and I didn't really have any money. And I sat with him and he spoke to me about business, and I got out the car and he said to my mum, who says to this day, he said, if we can harness that child's energy, we can turn it into good things. And so he's always kind of directed me in a way of harnessing my energy in the right way, because it can always go in the wrong way. And I suppose for Ed and I, what he really taught us from the very beginning, and I'm sure Ed's going to echo this, is that he made us look at Candy Kittens as a proper business. He made us run it as a corporate proper business. We did contracts as any corporate big business would do. We had meetings. We were always on time. We looked smart. We replied to emails properly. We always treated it like a proper business. And I think for us, that was a huge benefit at the beginning, because even though we were a complete startup, we were 21, 22 years old, wherever we were, we treated it straight away from like a proper business. What do you think, Ed? Is that about right? Is Ed frozen on us?
I'm back, sorry. The Wi-Fi cut out as you were speaking. I'm so sorry. First bit of editing there for you, Dan. Sorry.
Oh, happy days. I like a challenge.
Hey, James, you pass that to me then.
I've just you've actually frozen on us, Ed, so you might have to reconnect, annoyingly. He might be back.
I'm back.
No, you're not back. You're still frozen in a great way.
You're back vocally.
You're back vocally, but not visually.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. You're back. So Ed, my last thing was saying about Jonathan. He made us treat it like a sort of proper business from the start, and I think that was hugely beneficial for us.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jonathan's been a big part of the success at Candy Kittens, and in the early days, having that sort of grown-up view that to sort of overlay our energy and enthusiasm to get something going, I think was super important. And Dan, you mentioned sort of pouring gasoline on the flames. I think, to be really honest, in the early days, Jonathan was more about sort of putting water on our flames and actually trying to put us out. And he tried really hard to sort of, not, I wouldn't say put us off, but find all the reasons why it wouldn't work, dig into all the things that we were doing wrong, kind of bring us back down to earth a bit. And I think that's just as helpful, actually, because then we were on a mission to prove him wrong and say, actually, do you know what? We can do this, and we're gonna really, really work hard to show you that we can. So yeah, I mean, he would grill us. We'd meet him every single Monday night for probably the first 2 years, 3 years maybe of the business, and he would just rip us to shreds every single week. And I think that prepares you for the tough conversations and the challenges that you're going to have if you can sort of have real critique and real kind of difficult internal conversations and be tough on yourself. Then when a buyer pushes back on you, or you get a bit of a bad consumer review or whatever it is, you're already used to it, you're already ready. And I think a lot of people spend too much time with their kind of rose-tinted glasses on, thinking the world's brilliant and everybody kind of blowing smoke. That's not helpful. I think you really need to kind of be a bit tough to have a business and make it this far. And Jonathan's definitely the guy that's been tough on us.
That's so interesting, because outside looking in on the exterior, I would say like you kind of are this brand that just jump in and there's like fires coming up everywhere. When you said Jonathan put water on your fires, like, are there any specific fires he put water in, and is there any advice that you would then impart on to KEIR? Because obviously KEIR, you're now like bludgeoning your way forward, like speed of light. Is there any advice that you say to KEIR? Because I think lots of listeners are trying to do so much all at once. It'd be good to kind of understand what they should be almost saying no to or refining.
Yeah, I think Jamie touched on it already, but I think it's that professionalism. I think the biggest reason why a retailer wouldn't work with a small startup fledgling business is because it's just hard work for them. So if you think about it, if you're Tesco and you've got the choice between two brands, one of them's a really well-built, well-structured, professional organisation with good people, and the other is this kind of founder that's mega passionate but super chaotic and kind of all over the shop, which one are you going to pick? And I think what Jonathan did was, drill into us that you go into a meeting, you always have an agenda. You've got a clear objective. What's coming out of that meeting? Where are the minutes and the actions after that meeting that you immediately follow up with the buyer and get them emailed over? All these little things that add up to somebody go, oh, okay, I thought they were just started out, but they're actually behaving just like Mars or Mondelez in that way. And then it's mixing those two things together, because you don't want to lose your point of difference or your sort of challenger positioning, I don't think, because I think a big part of small brands is being refreshing and interesting, but absolutely being professional and well organised, I think is something that too many people sort of overlook.
I would also just quickly say as well is that it's when you start out on anything, right, it's very easy just to go, as you said, sort of go gung-ho into things. And actually what happens typically with most founders, you're a bit of control freaks, because that's why you're starting your own business, because you don't really want to work for anyone else, to be honest, and that you like enjoying doing your own thing. And so you find it tricky to take advice or listen to what other people are doing because you think you know right, and actually don't copy what other people are doing, but I think listen to what people say. And we have that a lot of the time with Kittens still now, where we probably said, oh, that's not right, and then actually realise it probably is right a little bit later down the line. So I think listening is quite key at the beginning.
It's really interesting as well to hear that you were that kind of slightly naughty, hyperactive kid when you were younger as well, Jamie, because that kind of really resonates with how I was. And I think one of the benefits that we've really seen from partnering up with you guys in the early stages is that real focus from you guys on putting those kind of structures in place and being really professional and being really well planned in what we're doing. So I've come from that, super kind of hyperactive, slightly scatty, going at everything myself mindset. And we're starting to move into more of a business that acts and behaves like a business that's been in the space for a lot longer than we have.
Yeah, and also, okay, what will happen then, right, is that it happens in everyday life. So I was like that, so scatty. Ed was a bit more controlled than I was. But actually then what it does is that you sort of, you create routine in your life, and you sort of start doing what I would call admin, which is just so boring, right? It's just the dullest thing in the world, because actually the most exciting thing is creating a new product or whatever it is. But actually the boring stuff, once you get the boring stuff done, the fun stuff happens. And for me, I just couldn't ever do any of that stuff. And what Jonathan did was just make sure, as Ed said, reply to the email, be on time. And that actually, when those small things fall into place, so do the bigger things, I think.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
so
totally.
interesting. I think it's always the little things that actually compound and then give you that edge. And I think what you were saying there about just the politeness, being on time, sending the emails. KEIR, just want to give a bit of context for listeners who may not know about NUUD and what you're doing, because I think it's a bit of a paradox. As you said, you're probably a bit like me, like pretty scatty all over the shop, but then you've approached this business kind of through more of a category lens versus kind of a ready, fire, aim. Just start selling on like a local stall or something. For listeners, like what's the why behind NUUD, and how did you kind of get it going in the first place?
Yeah, so just a kind of bit of background to me. I worked at Heineken for 8 years in various different commercial roles. So I was used to structure, but structure within quite a tight environment, only having a limited number of responsibilities and being a cog in a much bigger machine. So actually it's very different, owning, founding and operating your own business and being pulled in a number of different directions on a day-to-day basis. And that's, to the earlier point where I feel like Tuck Shop and Candy Kittens have been super valuable. But yeah, in terms of the way I approached it, I worked, as I say, at Heineken for about 8 years, but had a bit of an entrepreneurial itch that needed scratching. And I actually set up a pub business with a friend, an ex-colleague from Heineken, and we operated that for about a year. And pubs are interesting. They, on the face of it, they seem like quite kind of simple businesses to run, but actually there are so many moving parts, and you're constantly dealing with customers, and there are like day-to-day obstacles to get over that drag you away from dealing with the nuts and bolts of running the business. But we operated that for a year, and then ended up selling the lease because it wasn't quite right for us. But that was really the first kind of dipping of the toes into being an entrepreneur, being a founder, being a business owner. And once I'd done that, I was super keen to kind of continue on that journey. And I think, having spent some time at Heineken, one of the real learnings from that part of my career was the importance of understanding the consumer, understanding a category and opportunity within that category, and a bit around kind of how to build brands. Heineken are fantastic brand builders, but they're not such good innovators. So once we'd sold the pub, I started looking at opportunities in the food and drink space, and just started visiting grocery stores, so my local Waitrose, my local Sainsbury's, looking for gaps. And you were seeing some fantastic disruptive brands that were doing amazing things in big, mature, historically quite boring categories. Oatly in milk, Tony's in chocolate, the list goes on. And it just became quite apparent to me that there was no alternative in chewing gum. It was Wrigley's everywhere. And I knew that Wrigley's contained lots of synthetic flavors and sweeteners, and you were seeing the growth of all these kind of plant-based brands popping up across other categories. But there was no kind of trade up, no plant-based, no healthier alternative in gum. So that was really the kind of opening up of the opportunity, if you like. Had absolutely no idea that chewing gum contained all this single-use plastic, as most consumers don't. The big businesses do a fantastic job of hiding it within this proprietary ingredient term gum base. And upon doing a bit more research, found out that there was all this plastic hidden in gum, and started looking for alternatives. Found out that indigenous Americans used to chew on this tree sap called chicle, and had been doing it for centuries prior to big businesses getting hold of the category and, you know, looking at ways to strip out cost and improve efficiency and consistency, and moved from this sustainably harvested tree sap into a single-use plastic gum base. So really what we've done at NUUD is roll it back to the old school, sourced a supplier for this gum base, found a manufacturer that was prepared to kind of help us innovate with it and work with it in Europe. And we've arrived at an amazing product that's, you know, completely plastic free, plant based, naturally sugar free, and biodegradable.
No, it's amazing, mate. And I would love to kind of tell that into. So obviously, you know, Jamie said it's all about listening. They've talked about the kind of the professionalism that they learnt from Jonathan. Like, other than those two things, like, what is the kind of been the most salient piece of wisdom Jamie and Ed have imparted on you that you implement at NUUD on a kind of a weekly basis or so?
Yeah, I think it's that piece around structure, definitely.
Right.
You know, I've gone from operating the business on my own to starting to, you know, recruit team members. And it's really important once you've got people within your team that you are quite structured in the way you operate, speaking to buyers, etc. So yeah, structure and professionalism is certainly a huge thing. And then I suppose the other big thing, which I think Ed, without wanting to blow smoke up his arse too much, is fantastic at, is just the way that he operates with his team and the respect that they've all got for him, and you know, the amazing culture that they've developed at Candy Kittens. Everyone within that business absolutely loves, you know, going to work every day and loves what they do. And I think the boys have done a fantastic job of creating that amazing environment, which is quite, I'd imagine, quite tough to kind of hang on to as you scale.
Well, and that's the thing. Every guest I've had on this podcast, that they always say, like, the riddle wrapped in the enigma is keeping the founder's magic as you scale, because as you scale, there's more people to kind of mobilize and buy into the vision. So Ed, how do you do that from a kind of a managerial point of view? Because I think there'll be loads in this for listeners. Like, I suppose the first question is keeping the founder's magic alive, but then inspiring the team to move forward structurally.
Yeah, no, it's very kind of KEIR to say I'll slip him that 20 quid later on this afternoon. But I think that it is a tough one. And actually, you know, you say that the culture and that is hard to sort of hold on to. If anything, I think it's something that we've probably come to quite late. So in the early days, you sort of head down, fighting to survive and prove the concept. And if I look back, we probably weren't very good at that culture and team stuff. We always thought, oh, people are enjoying it because we're enjoying it and we're running fast and they're just going to keep up with us and it'll be great. And then you sort of get to a point where you realise it's actually your job to make sure that they're enjoying it, and it's your responsibility to bring them along with you on that. You can't sort of take it for granted. So we put a lot more energy into that over probably the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm really proud of the place we've got to now. And I think one of the things that is really important is to keep coming back to why you started in the first place and bringing the team along on that. You know, we have new people joining the team. We've recently had 2 or 3 people join in the last month. And I'm sitting down with them actually tomorrow to go through the story of Candy Kittens, what we did in the very early days and how we did it and why we did it and what's important to us, beyond all of the kind of latest strategies and the latest kind of marketing plan or whatever it might be. Just what's at the heart of the business and what do I really care about. So those things I think are really important. And we also, I suppose on a sort of cultural level, we have 4 team trips a year where we take the team out of the office, out of London, and we go and do something completely different. So one of those recently, we went to the Wave in Bristol, which is a wicked kind of artificial kind of surf lake, which is quite fun. I'd recommend to anybody to get down there. And also, if you can go with Jamie, he looks pretty good in a wetsuit, so I'd recommend that too. But we went down there and we spent a whole day in their kind of like classroom facility there, just chatting about the business and what people's concerns were, ask us some questions. Because I think as well, you spend a lot of time day to day on the operational stuff, and it's all little bits, and you're fighting problems, and you're overcoming challenges, and what do we do with this thing, and a delivery's been rejected here and there, and whatever. And actually just talking to us about what are our hopes and dreams for the business, and what do we think about this thing, and are we worried about the cost of living, and except whatever it might be, just being human and having those kind of personal conversations. can go a really long way, I think.
Yeah, I just think echoing that is so important. Like Ed and I sat down once with a guy called Lord Mark Price, who's a pretty interesting guy, and he was, correct me if I'm wrong, and he was CEO of John Lewis.
Yeah, it's John Lewis.
Yeah, John Lewis. Anyway, he has a new business which is called Engaging Works, which is all about happiness in the workplace. And the whole culture at John Lewis was to make sure that every employee was happy and loving it and enjoying it. And the statistics around how long the employees at John Lewis stayed is crazy. They stay for years, for their entire lives, and because they love it so much. And what happens when, as a founder, as a business, as a CEO, whatever you're doing, it's very easy to forget about individuals around you because you have this one drive, this one thing, this is where you're heading. But actually, when you create this sort of happy workplace for employees, then results go through the roof. It's mad. And actually there's statistics in America which suggest that like 33% of Americans actually have a negative impact on the business because they just can't be bothered, right? So you're just employing people who actually have a negative impact. So if you are doing these trips or creating this culture or making sure that everyone feels that they're really a part of the business and not just employees, that they're actually driving for the same thing, then you see real success, I think.
No, definitely. And I want to kind of dig a bit further into that because I've seen it firsthand at Manilife, whereby at times it can be hard for employees to voice what they're actually feeling. So I suppose if we actually look at it on a weekly basis, either Ed or Jamie, how do you actually unearth what the employee may be feeling about a particular issue? Because I think as a lot of founders can be up here, like driving the force, but actually getting to the weeds of what they're feeling can be quite hard. And if you have that dissonance, it can be quite dangerous sometimes. Like how do you guys actually do that?
I think this is I think one of the areas where Jamie and I are really good at that kind of yin and yang. We're very different people.
Right.
So I might be working quite tunnel vision on the plan and making sure we execute and deliver that. And Jamie's much more kind of zoomed out, big picture kind of guy. And it really helps because Jamie can come into the office almost to the team as a bit of a mate and the fun guy. And I can be the boring one if you like. So we're totally comfortable with that. And Jamie then maybe has those more personal conversations. People may be more likely to open up. And we have a structure, I guess, where people can share their issues with the person they feel comfortable sharing that with. We have 3 team meetings a week where we talk just openly about whatever's going on. And I think you've got to do it by showing people that you care. So it's something that's built up over time. We have done lots of things, particularly over the last 2-3 years. I don't need to tell you how difficult that's been for everybody, where we've sort of gone above and beyond the standard policies to help somebody that's in need, whether that's helping somebody financially, whether that's helping somebody with more time, whether that's helping somebody with a medical thing or whatever it may be. And I think once the teams see that, they realise that actually we're here for them and we will do things to help. But you can only help if they tell you, right? So it's a two-way street, and trying to constantly communicate that is an important part of managing the team and making them all feel like they're part of the family, I suppose.
No, it's so interesting because I think it's one of the hardest things to do as you scale. Where I want to jump into now is, again, doing research for this. I think at least you 3 have a kind of obsession with brands. I read somewhere, Jamie, that you kind of wanted Candy Kittens to be the marriage of Willy Wonka and Playboy, which I thought was brilliant. Look
at Ed freaking out.
and then Ed.
Official press line anymore, that one, Dan.
We'll take that one out.
No, okay.
And then Ed, I read that you were doing I think graphic design and helping build brands and packaging. Obviously, KEIR, you're now you've built NUUD. Maybe KEIR, you can take this one, and then Jamie and Ed, you jump in and add some colour to it. But I'd love to know what you think a brand is. Like, what should a brand be in maybe one sentence or two?
Oh, blimey. What a question.
I know. Wow.
Whoa. Are you sure that's not one?
Yeah, take it away. Go on, take it away.
I need the guys at Motherin to feel that one. Oh, what is a brand? Blimey. I don't know.
Ed's got a great quote for this, Ed, if you want to kick it off, because I know what he's about to say. Ed, you got one.
Yeah, it's actually a Jeff Bezos Bezos quote, and he says that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I think it's an interesting one to the obvious kind of go-to in people's brains. I think you think brand and you start to think colours, logos, brand identity. And that's absolutely true, but it's very much the kind of full stop. For me, it's what does a brand make you feel? What does a brand what sort of lasting impression does it leave on your mind? What are their values? What do they care about? Do they care about the same things as you, etc.? If you think about what your favourite brand is, I can guarantee you're not thinking about your favourite logo. You're thinking about the brand that is epic because it makes you feel something. So what are you going to try and make your consumers feel, I think, is probably the best place to start when you think about your brand.
Not
Boom.
completely.
Boom.
No,
There you
yeah.
go. There you go.
We're off to
Save
the
me
races
there.
now.
There you go. But I do want to say it's interesting though with brands and having obsession with it, right? I remember if you go onto Ed's Instagram or whatever, you'll see that he'll be following all these different brands that he just thoroughly enjoys. And he'll go, or if I speak to him about a certain brand, he'll be like, yeah, I love it, love the way they've done this and done that. And it's when you're creating a brand, it's all about those sort of little individual things that really make a difference. And I think growing up, probably all three of us were obsessed with brands in some sort of way, whether it was clothing brands or it was, the latest fridge brand or whatever it was. And, instead of focusing on school or whatever it was, I was just obsessed with Abercrombie and Fitch and how it grew so quickly. I was obsessed with it at the beginning when it first came to the UK and when it was in America. And so there's always been, I think, for the three of us, an obsession with brands, for sure.
Definitely. And what other than Abercrombie and Fitch, I'd love to know what were some of the brands you kind of revered and respected in the kind of using them as almost an influence in Candy Kittens.
Well, I think for me, it was always about brands going back to things as what it made me feel. So, when Abercrombie and Fitch, and obviously this documentary, so perhaps it's not as great as we first think, but Abercrombie and Fitch was inspirational at the very beginning. It was cool, it was sexy, it was fun, it was exciting, it was different. You had these good-looking people standing on the doors, and that was new for everyone, right? Because it was kind of sex that was acceptable. And I thought that was really interesting. And then, I think for me, the other one was Dylan's Candy Bar, which was it is an American brand, Ralph Lauren's daughter, Dylan Loren. And also the fact that it was Ralph Lauren's daughter was exciting because Ralph Lauren was such a premium brand that I could never afford. And so it was this unattainable thing that I always wanted. But the attainable thing was his daughter that had created this sweet brand. And you would go into the sweet store and it was like Willy Wonka's factory, which we all grew up with, right? We grew up with this story of Willy Wonka. So I think an amalgamation of all of those things together, this sort of sexy, fun, exciting, sort of accessible premium product was what Candy Kittens was all about. And I think we kind of, from there we sort of built on it. But at the very beginning, that was sort of the idea behind it.
Completely. And what you said there, you said that it's all about the little things. I think if you focus on the little things, that's what makes people feel something about your brand. I'd love to jump into the weeds on that and explore, what are the little things you guys do at Candy Kittens? And we'll discuss this with you, KEIR, as well in a sec. But what are the little things that you do that kind of give you that edge and make people palpably feel something about the brand?
I think there's lots of little things, and I think they add up to you appearing bigger than you are. And I think that's one thing I've always been really interested in. So from day one, we would send samples to the buyer in a branded case with a printed, branded presentation and branded tape on the box and stickers and branded comp slips, whatever it might be, so that when you get this box, you feel, oh, wow, this is an established, proper business. And I think lots of people overlook that. I've heard you talk on the podcast before, Dan, about how Manulife do this or other brands do this to really kind of wow the retailer when they receive that sample. And I think the assumption that you can just send something in to anyone, whether it's a buyer or a consumer or whoever, and just the product alone is going to be exciting enough, I think is really sort of a mistake. So going in hard on those sort of things, and when we first opened our very first pop-up shop, which was kind of the launch of Candy Kittens, we opened that store, a fully branded shop front. Everybody in this team had head-to-toe uniforms, matching shoes. We all had the same pair of Converse on, or whatever. And all those little things add up to then emulating the Abercrombies of the world, or the super brands that you see. And I think that really helps. I think there's threads through all brands, little threads that kind of make it what it is. And whether that's, I don't know, the orange colour that EasyJet use everywhere, or the kind of tone of voice that in a brand like Innocent or whatever it may be, those little threads I think tie it all together. And for us, that was always, I suppose, the presentation of the brand, how it looked, and making sure that everything kind of followed that same identity. And even at a point where you probably can't quite afford to buy everybody a pair of Converse, you push yourself to do it anyway, because it's those things that then make you appear like a big brand that's sort of here to stay.
No, I love that. And I suppose, KEIR, mate, because you've got, chewing gum was quite an archaic category in some respects, and now you're coming in with this new, fun, irreverent brand. What are the little things you're trying to do, whether that's with buyers or with consumers, that are giving you that edge?
Yeah, and I think, this is another learning that we're really taking from Candy Kittens. It's really important to try and create that brand world, if you like. But as a small business, that can be quite challenging. And I suppose what we're really trying to focus on at the moment is the consumer, and how our kind of offer and our brand is communicated really clearly, versus kind of the big category leader that's been doing the same thing for decade after decade. So for us, the brand was built around the understanding that 90% of consumers are concerned about plastic pollution, for example, or, there's this huge boom in demand for plant-based alternatives because people are looking at it from a healthier or more sustainable perspective, or, the fact that we're trying to shine a spotlight on the ingredient transparency problems within chewing gum because of all this plastic hidden within gum base. So I think the way that we've approached it as a small brand and as a challenger is to really focus on our key kind of differentiators and make sure that they come through super powerfully in everything we do, because it's very easy to get dragged into a number of different kind of directions. So yeah, I mean, you'll see our strapline on the front of the packaging, chew plants, not plastic. That in itself encapsulates everything that we're about in 4 words. And that's super, super important in the impulse category, where people have 2, 3, 4 seconds to make a decision. You need to get, your key kind of benefits over to the consumer in a very short space of time. So that's been really, really important as a young and growing brand.
That's a great point, by the way. That fact of, especially when you're an impulse, product, that you have 2 or 3, 4 seconds for it to capture attention. I think that's key for anyone listening who are selling a product in that category. That it's so true, and especially in an area which is so competitive. How do you capture something straight away? That is the most important thing.
I totally agree, and I think the whole kind of world that you create around your brand is really, really important. But ultimately, there has to be, a consumer demand, a consumer need that's currently being unmet for it. And if you're not doing that, and if you're not conveying that in your brand and in your packaging or in your service, then ultimately there's going to be minimal uptake, and you're not going to have the cut through that you need.
Yeah, Ed always said from the beginning. Ed always said from the beginning, and I think you stay now, is you just cutting corners is the worst thing in the world that you can do from the very start, and it's very easy to do that, right? Because you want to save money here and there, and you want to, I don't know, do whatever you have to do to keep your head above the water. And but actually, like you said, Kay, just making sure that everything is just so precise and so good, and don't actually cut those corners ever. If you have to pay an extra 50 quid for a photographer because it's going to be so much better, pay that extra 50 quid because it's going to make all the difference in the long run.
I'm constantly wanting to get everything done yesterday, and Ed is really kind of trying to instill into me that it is about making sure that everything is done with a real focus on quality.
That's your ADD kicking in, yeah.
That's what I'm like. I leave a wake of chaos in everything I do. I would never be able to work for Kittens, but yeah, no, I need to. It's good for me to learn as well, because I try and not cut corners.
There's lots of chaos
corners, but I'm trying to do
here,
it. Yeah, everything. So KEIR, because what you said about the tube plants not plastic, I also think the name is just like, in terms of getting that attention at the shelf edge. Out of sheer curiosity here, and I asked this to Lucky Saint, I asked Luke, like, what were the names that didn't make the bill pre-Lucky Saint? Like, what other names were kind of bubbling in your mind other than NUUD? Because I think NUUD is just so bang on.
Oh, that's a really good question. My memory doesn't go back that far. I think we looked at Halo gum potentially at one point, but yeah, I can't remember any of the others. I really liked NUUD as soon as I heard it, just because it really encapsulates that kind of nakedness, no hidden ingredients, no nasties, natural. So as soon as we landed on NUUD, we were like, yeah, that's the one. But actually, we were looking at potentially calling it NUUD, but spelled NUDE. And I can tell you now, you don't want to jump onto Google and Google NUDE gum, because you'll get some quite interesting images and website links. So that's the rationale behind the misspelling.
That's hilarious. And you said that you focus kind of relentlessly on the consumer. And Jamie and Ed, I listened to a podcast, and you talked about having a thing, like a picture of someone called Katie Clapham on your office wall. Is that still up there, I'm assuming?
It is, yeah. So we've got this kind of brand persona, if you like, and we created this thing in kind of like a brand workshop that we did with an agency, and we decided to call her Katie Clapham because our kind of model consumer probably lived in Clapham and blah, blah, blah. We actually went on to hire somebody called Katie Clapham as well in real life. That was her actual name.
That's hilarious.
But that's probably a story for another time. But yeah, the idea is that you have a person that you can really relate to and make it a little bit more interesting when you're taking these brand decisions. So you can say, well, what would Katie think of that? And to be honest, we haven't done this for a little while, but in our old office, we used to have a big blackboard that was all about what Katie was up to this week, and we'd fill it out at the start of every week. So what's Katie watching? What's Katie listening to? What events is Katie going to? So if you had it this week, for example, you might say that Katie's probably watching the new series of Stranger Things, she's listening to the new Drake album, and she's going to Glastonbury this weekend. And that then informs how our brand positions itself for the week to come. So whether it's the social media stuff that we're posting, the kind of things we're engaging with, where our brand might be. We're launching a new pack this week at Glastonbury Festival with Co-op, which is super exciting. So that's like, you would do that because Katie's going there. And if Katie wasn't, then you might think again. So trying to think about your consumer as a real person, because they are real people, I think is a nice little trick for us. There was where that came from. We had a really interesting conversation with an agency called Big Fish, who are kind of like the real OGs in the branded consumer goods space. And they were very, very successfully managing the brand for Yo Valley. And they created an amazing yogurt for amazing ad for Yo Valley yogurt, which won loads of awards. It was an ad in the fight that they ran in the final of X Factor, when X Factor was at its peak. You're talking like 10, 50 million viewers. And it was these farmers, you might remember it, you can see it on YouTube, that jump out of a tractor and do kind of like a Backstreet Boys type song, all about Yo Valley. Hilarious advert, won loads of awards, really, really brilliant production. But actually, all of the Yo Valley consumers were completely turned off by that, because they suddenly thought this Yo Valley yogurt, this organic sort of artisan thing that they really felt was safe and healthy for their family, had become this big corporation that was advertising on X Factor, which they probably weren't that big a fan of, and suddenly turned them all off, and they lost loads and loads of consumers overnight. They then revisited that and then created this consumer profile for Yo Valley called Sally Valley. And the idea is that Sally Valley potters around in her Land Rover, and she has 3 kids in school and blah, 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 and she's a stay-at-home mum and whatever. And that was how they sort of turned back on to their customer and started to think through her eyes, and bring the brand back to where it should be, rather than this kind of shiny thing that they wanted it to be.
Yeah, it's so interesting. They lost 3 million customers doing that. How crazy is that? It was 3 million.
Mental.
It's mental. And actually, Ed said this great thing the other day, which sort of leads on from it, which actually now I sort of relate to in so many ways of life. And I think it's one of the greatest pieces of, or valuable pieces of sort of information you can get, is that, and I might murder it, Ed, so please correct me if I'm wrong, is that Ed knows this guy, or that there's a guy who has a brand. He was a rower, and he was in his boat, and he used to row the entire time. And every single time him and his friends would leave the boat, they would always say to each other, does it make the boat go faster? So we're going to go for a curry tonight. Does it make the boat go faster? If it does, okay, we can go and have a curry. Okay, we're going to wear this lycra today. Does it make the boat go faster? Okay, it does make the boat go faster because it's lighter. Okay, we're going to wear that lycra. And then they set up a company which is called Does It Make the Boat Go Faster? So with your brand, you're always considering, with anything you say or anything you're doing, whether it's personal life or your business, you're always saying, does it make the boat go faster? If it does, do it. If it doesn't, then don't do it. And it's very easy then to cancel things out, which is a really good way and a simple way of analysing your way through it.
Yeah, there's so much in that, and I think what you kind of want to look at this through the Katie Clapham angle, because I think there's a difference between a business decision which looks great on an Excel spreadsheet and like a decision that's right for the brand. I interviewed Ben Branson from Seedlip the other week, and he was saying, look, mate, like we could have spent loads of money on gondola ends, an ATL campaign, but instead we decided to do build a garden at the Chelsea Flower Show, and it did astoundingly well. They got all the buyers down there, and it created this massive buzz around the brand. I would love to know, what's been the kind of a hard business decision you've had to make at Candy Kittens, where you've then lent on Katie Clapham to make sure you're making the right decision?
God, that's a tricky one. I don't know, Ed, what would you say? It always goes back to cash. Always goes back to money issues and things like that. Ed, what would you say are one of our decisions that we've had to make, and it's been a real tricky one to do? I think maybe one of them was, when we get offered, we've been offered certain brands, for retailers that actually probably don't match the brand, and we've been offered the likes of sort of the Primarks and the discount retailers, and actually does that fit our brand? It probably doesn't at the moment, and for us that's a big decision, especially when we first start out, because revenue is everything. You want to keep alive, it's everything. So to have to say no to those things at the beginning are really hard, but also you have to say no to those things. Otherwise, again, what is your brand? What are you representing? So I think for us, those were the really hard ones.
Yeah, I think it's really tough. I think also with that kind of creating this brand persona, you start to think about what she wants, not what you want, which is a bit of a transition. So my vision for Candy Kittens is probably quite different sometimes to what the consumer vision could be. And I think that's a bit of a challenge. You've really got to, we're creating a brand for a slightly different audience to ourselves. So we really got to think and put ourselves in their shoes. And we all, in the early days, probably tried to be all things to all people. And I don't think that really works, because then, you don't stand for anything. Another guy that we did a brand workshop with told us that if you don't stand for anything, here we go.
If you don't stand for anything, you stand for nothing.
If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. We got there. It's obviously so memorable, right? Really made a mark on us, that one. But if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything, and I think it's really true. So we were trying to be a brand that was for everybody, and in the end, you go, actually, 85% of our consumers are female. We know that. So why don't we really dial down into that and make sure our comms represent that female audience and talk to them directly? We don't try and sort of, let's put a little bit less pink on it because we're being a bit too girly, or we're being a bit this, and actually those are the things that people loved about the brand. So lean into it and actually dial that up, if anything. So that's probably a big lesson in the early days, was not creating the brand for us, but creating a brand for the people that were buying it.
There's so much in that for listeners. I think it's something we should be doing at Moneylife, is almost having someone, even if it's just in the office, or someone we can relate to. Because as you say, I think you can get so caught up in your own head and ego of what you want to do, but if that doesn't resonate with the consumer, then yeah, it just doesn't work.
But it's
and
certainly
Kira,
true. I mean, when I've had conversations with Stuart about Manilife, I've never met anybody more passionate about peanut butter in my entire life. And you're like, wow, this guy knows stuff about peanut butter I didn't even think I needed to know. And it's insane and amazing, but you have to realise that Joe Bloggs on the street just wants to spread something on their toast in the morning. And they don't really care where it comes from. They don't really care what goes into it. And there's all different levels of that conversation, right? And I think it's going back to that 2-3 seconds to communicate your message. What things are you going to choose to tell them that make the difference? And yeah, thinking in their shoes is really important.
And KEIR, mate, do you have like your equivalent of Katie Clapham? Because again, outside looking in, I think your product solves so many problems that it could be for everyone. But as we've just said, you can't, if you try and be everything to everyone. I mean, I've just butchered the quote, whatever it is, but like you can't be
all three of you that have butchered it now.
You can't be all things to everyone, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a difficult one for a small business to have the time and the resource and the tools to really, really get under the skin of your customer and really understand them. I think, the chewing gum category in general is quite a wide one. So people from, 15 right through to 75 chew gum. So that's a benefit, if you like. But I think it's really understanding the type of consumer that our points of difference appeal to. We're trying to create a brand that will trade people out of chewing on single-use plastic, and because of that, it needs to appeal to a wide demographic. I think it's about trying to create that cohort of nudists, as we call them, the real kind of net promoters of the business that are going to help us as we go through the scaling process. So we know that 50% of chewers are under 25. So, that has kind of informed some of the decisions we've made around the packaging that we've gone for and the design of the brand. And it's about kind of recruiting those younger chewers early that are potentially kind of more engaged with the plastic waste problem, with sustainability, really kind of religiously checking side of pack and want to understand what they're putting into their body. And that, I think that has really kind of informed what we've done so far.
Yeah, completely. Where I want to jump to now, and it's actually quite interesting exploring this, especially at the beginning of the conversation when you said, Jonathan said, do everything properly and be a proper business. But I listened to quite a few podcasts, and I think, Jamie, you were the main kind of person saying this, is you said that naivety is a superpower on quite a few podcasts, and I really believe that, because I think lots of listeners think they need to have this whole business plan, everything all sorted. I would love to understand why is naivety a superpower, and then are there any stories around where it has manifested as a superpower?
Yeah, and also that's not a thing that Ed and I regurgitated, right? We actually just would say that to each other all the time, and we both totally believe with that. Like it's very easy to. It's very easy when starting a brand or playing a sport or whatever it is to just follow what the crowd is doing. And a very smart man called Rory Sutherland tells a very long story, but I'll make it shorter, which is about never following logic, right? Because if you follow logic, you get back in the same place as everybody else. So you should always go against the grain. And it's very easy to follow logic, right? And naivety is your biggest weapon, because when you're younger, you don't know anything. And if Ed and I were to start Candy Kittens now, we would do it completely differently to what we were doing when we were 21, 22, because we are more experienced, we understand the world, we realise that actually you can't just try and phone up Sainsbury's and ask for, that you don't think you're the most important person in the world, you realise that you're actually not. You basically become self-aware as you get older, and when you're younger, you're pretty much a sociopath. But actually, so that sort of naivety is such a weapon, because it means you'll do things that you think are right, and actually you'll do things which are against the grain. So prime example with Candy Kittens is the fact that we made packets of sweets that were for all ages, because we thought it was a cool thing to do. We made sweets that were gluten-free. We made sweets that were vegan. We made a grape flavour. We made apple and elderflower, Eton mess flavour. No one was doing these things. And if Ed and I had hired or taken advice from someone at Maynard's or Roundtree's or Haribo or whatever it was, we would have probably followed what they were doing. Therefore, we would have been the same as them. So actually, the biggest thing that you can do is take advice for sure, 100%. It's great to take advice, but actually following your gut, following your naivety is your biggest weapon, because that means you're going to stand out from the crowd. Exactly the thing that you want to, as Keir said from the beginning, is you want to stand out, right? So how do you stand out? You follow your gut. You don't follow what other people are doing. And that's why naivety is key.
And it's been so, that is so relevant to what we've done at NUUD. Who would launch an impulse-driven product like a chewing gum in the middle of a pandemic where no one's socialising, no one's meeting, no one needs it? Without a load of naivety, you just wouldn't do that. And so many people said, you won't disrupt the chewing gum category. It's impossible. The big players have too much power. They have too much control. And we're a long way from fully disrupting the chewing gum category. But, we're starting to chip away at it. And without bags and bags of naivety, we just wouldn't have even started.
Mm. Mm. And Jamie, you said there, if we were to start Candy Kittens again tomorrow, we'd do it completely differently because we're more self-aware. I would love to know, what would you do differently and why, if you were to try to go, because again, every guest on this podcast has said kind of going from 0 to 1 million like retail sales is the trough of sorrow. It's like the slog. If you were to go on that journey again with everything you now know, what would you guys do differently and why?
Well, it's interesting, right? This is actually how you get rid of imposter syndrome. This sort of a theologist? What the hell is it? A psychologist? What the hell? It's a philosopher. There we go. We got there in the end. There's a philosopher who basically says the way you get rid of imposter syndrome is you say, if you were in an alternative life, if you could, be reborn again, could you do the same thing that you've done now? And if you could in some sort of ways, then you shouldn't have imposter syndrome. So I think if Ed and I would start again, we would do it differently, but we would probably end up in the same place. It would just be a different road, right? I think that's what we'd do. What we would do differently? God, I mean, so many things probably, but so many things not as well. I think the biggest thing that I think realizing managing people is really important. I think that's a really big thing. I think managing, you suddenly start to realize that actually, Ed knows this, right? Ed, who's MD of the company, Ed just spends his life managing people. That's what he does, and that's a really tough thing to do. Managing, I've actually realized as I got older that I'm not particularly good at managing people. I'm a very good people person and I can bring morale up and I'm very good at doing that. Managing them, not so much, because you have to be tough at times and you have to be this at times, and perhaps that's my weak point. And also the other thing is cash. Just being so on top of cash. And I think probably at the beginning, cash was key. And also, last one is equity. Equity at the beginning is cheap. Give equity away for someone to...
One, really. Yeah. I think it comes from the cash point. But I think one thing I would say to anyone is that it's very, very easy to give away equity in your business at early stages. And, I think we're a little bit biased, but I think KEIR's made the right choice, taking cash from us that comes with experience and a bit more to it as well, right? So what do you get with the money is something that I'd always say to people that are raising money. It's very, very easy to find money, which maybe sounds naive and stupid, but sort of trust me, if you've got a good idea, there'll be people queuing up to throw money at that, whether that's sort of proper financial institutions like banks, or it's private investors or VCs, whatever it may be, there'll be money out there. And I think you've got to be really, really patient to make sure that the money you're bringing into the business also comes with added extras that are going to take you further, because the money alone is it's just the fuel in the car. If you don't know sort of how to drive it, then there's no point having that fuel there. So that for me is really, really key. And in the early days, we were so desperate to get cash into the business to make things work that we kind of take money from anyone, in all honesty. And we're very, very grateful. And without those people that generously kind of backed us, we wouldn't be here today. But if we were to start again, I think we'd go out and raise money slightly differently. But it makes me a bit nervous thinking about doing it again, because I think you would lose that naivety. And there's loads of conversations that I'm constantly having now, even sort of today, where trying to force people to say, hang on, if we thought like that, we would have never have launched Candy Kittens in the first place. So there's loads of challenges in the world now, right? I mean, the rising costs on a daily basis or whatever. And if you looked at all those and listed them down and thought, these are all the things that could go wrong, you may as well just shut up shop and walk away and call it a day. But actually, we ignored all of the advice. We ignored all the risks and just kind of stuck our head down and went for it. And sometimes I think you need to do that. You've really got to sort of trust yourself, as Jamie said. So yeah, starting again fills me a little bit with horror, because I'd imagine we think we're sort of the big guys that have been there and done it before, and probably get it all wrong because we try and follow the book. And I don't think that would work. So yeah, not having a rule book, not having a plan in those early days was 100% our biggest power.
The best business plan is no business plan.
Yeah, no, but what I love what I love about doing this podcast is you always find these kind of nuanced bits, and I think what you guys do, it's almost the balance of naivety, but with being a professional is obviously what Jonathan told you. It's like balance that naivety with doing the right thing and having the right kind of structure in place. Like that sweet spot is brilliant. But I want to jump into now. KEIR is this kind of kittens, not dragons, because you were on Dragon's Den, and then you managed to meet these guys and get investment from them. I'd love to know, because lots of listeners are going to have to go and pitch for new business. They're going to have to push themselves out of their comfort zone. I'd love to first ask how you got in contact with Jamie and Ed, and like, what were the specific things you showed them to grab their attention, basically.
Yeah, so I think Dragon's Den was the reason that Ed even found out about us in the first place. So that was a hugely kind of beneficial and kind of exciting experience. And I think what Dragon's Den did was just provide that kind of anchor for getting the product and the proposition and the problems around regular chewing gum out in front of the consumer. And I think, Ed, your wife had just given birth, hadn't she? And you and her saw me on Dragon's Den in the first couple of weeks of childbirth. We were stuck
at home and we had our feet up on the sofa, trying to chill out, and KEIR popped up on the screen.
So Ed fired me a very nice LinkedIn message, just saying, wife's just given birth, and we've been watching lots of TV, and you popped up on Dragon's Den, thought you're excellent, and just said, very kindly offered his help and his advice as and when I needed it. And so when it came round to fundraising at the end of last year, Ed was right at the top of my list of people to contact as a potential investor. So I sent Ed over the deck, and I think you spoke to your shareholders, and things kind of transpired fairly quickly from there. But I think the attraction of partnering with Ed and Jamie and the Candy Kittens team, as Ed kind of alluded to, it's about smart money. They've injected a huge amount of money into the business, which is absolutely already helping us kind of supercharge our growth. But it's the main attraction to me was the fact that these boys have been through it all before, and they've, the huge amount of experience that they've brought from 10 years of plant-based confectionery and growing a brand from nothing. The similarities around the category as well. They've gone into a huge, quite boring, quite mundane, pretty standard confectionery category, and done an amazing job of bringing in a new lens, a new product, and brought the plant-based revolution to that category. And I think that was kind of the real attraction of partnering up with them.
And then I suppose Jamie and Ed, like, what's the kind of the why behind Tuck Shop? Because I think lots of listeners, and we'll jump into this bit in a sec, but they would love to get involved. But I'd love to know the kind of the genesis and the why behind it first.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a couple of the lessons that we've learned since starting the business, and there's more than we could ever have time to tell you about on a call or a podcast. And we felt that if we didn't sort of download those learnings and lessons and sort of save them somewhere else, they were just going to disappear from our brains and become a distant memory. And being able to pass that on to other brands that want to challenge the big guys and really sort of provide a better solution to whatever it may be, whether that's kind of sustainability issues and the work KEIR's doing in the plastic-free space, or vegan, or challenging other boring categories to bring some excitement and entertainment to the consumer. We believe passionately that the world of grocery is dominated too much by big players, and the consumers don't have a choice. That they just get sold whatever the big guys decide to cook up, and that's, I don't think, good for anybody. So we really wanted to pass those learnings on and give other brands a chance to sort of do what we've done. And I guess then sort of hopefully we build a kind of stable of brands.
He's just gone.
I think we lost.
I think he's gone. Yeah.
Ah, let's wait for him.
Days.
Hold on. The CK Wi-Fi is really good. Just don't understand.
Am I back?
But, yeah, you're back, buddy.
Yeah,
you're back.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. And I guess we wanted to try and build a stable of brands that we can then have an impact on and work closely with those founders, management teams, as they're sort of starting and following our footsteps. And with a bit of luck, our experience will help them sort of skip out that horrible learning phase and just accelerate that growth. And if we can be a part of that and sort of enjoy some of the success with them, all the better. But it's really about passing on the learnings and helping somebody get to where we've got, I suppose.
Yeah, and also I think, with Tuck Shop, Ed and I get introduced or emailed a huge amount of time from different brands, and brands which are really fun and exciting, but it's about really picking those individual ones that we really feel like we can help and are going to make a sort of difference, to the world, I suppose, as well, that they're really going to change things, and especially with NUUD, we can sit here and KEIR can sort of say it all about the statistics around chewing gum and what's in it and how bad it is and all these different things. And what NUUD is doing is just incredible. And also with Tuck Shop as well, what we look at is our individuals, and actually, naivety comes into a real problem sometimes, actually, is that everyone thinks they're an entrepreneur. And really and truly not everyone is an entrepreneur, because it's tough and hard. And I think being incredibly self-aware at the beginning of when you're starting a business is totally key. And so Ed and I also find individuals who potentially were a little like me, I suppose, who had these great ideas, who also potentially had some sort of profile and wanted us to set up a brand, but just was never probably going to have the patience or the self-awareness to go and do it. So what we do is we then help them build a brand that they want to build because we know what we're doing with it. And so we do that as well, and we sort of image what happened with Ed and I at the very beginning. I was this, as we said before, gung-ho kind of guy who had ADD and was impatient, and Ed brought the kind of calmness and sort of strategy behind the things, and he was a lot much more level, and that's why it worked so well.
And I think for us, it's about ultimately having businesses that we can sort of roll our sleeves up and get involved with as well, because we enjoy that, and that's the fun bit. I think for people like us, it's ingrained in us to start things and get going on stuff, and it sort of re-energizes us. I mean, I love sitting down with KEIR and trying to hash out a problem or whatever, because that's the stuff that we were doing in the early days that gives you so much more energy to sort of break away from the monotony of where we are today, perhaps with Candy Kittens. So yeah, really, really exciting. We're not interested in sort of being part of big investment rounds where there's lots and lots of other people involved and there's sort of millions of pounds worth of sort of VC or private equity money on the table. We want to be sort of at that early stage where we can invest and work side by side to bring something to the market. And I think that's, hopefully we can all have good fun and a good laugh in the process.
There's so much in that. So I think the first kind of follow-up question to that is there'll be people listening to this right now who will want to, get involved, like yourself, KEIR. What are the three kind of foundations you would need to see from a founder to kind of get your attention? Because you must get so many pitch decks, you've got so many ideas coming through your inbox. What are the three things you need to see?
I think there's a couple of things. I think, first of all, the thing that really attracted me to NUUD, and this is credit to KEIR, I think, is the ambition behind that brand. It's not a brand that is an artisanal kind of chewing gum that maybe is going to appear on the shelves of Whole Foods and maybe be sold at your local farmer's market, and that's your lot. It's something that is genuinely built from day one to go toe-to-toe with Wrigley's and knock them off their perch. And if we can do that together, then that's brilliant. And that's kind of resonates with us. That's what we set out to do with Candy Kittens. And I think a lot of people build these brands and have great ideas, but don't really have that sort of goalpost in mind. Where are you taking it? What are you really going to achieve? So that's probably number one, is the scale and ambition there. I think number two is the individual. I think you're always back in the jockey rather than the horse. So for us, if you can see a really great sort of passion in somebody and a good sort of raw skill set, then you can feel that whatever sort of problems or creases that we need to iron out in the business or the brand, you can work on that. That's easy, but the person you can't change. So you need to really believe that person's going to be the one. And then finally, it's more of just a kind of standard criteria thing. But as Jamie said, we're trying to do things that maybe do good for the world. So we're very aware that as a business, we've worked hard to change our recipe to vegan and become carbon neutral. We certify as a B Corp at Candy Kittens very shortly, and those things have become more and more important to us as we've worked in this industry. In all honesty, they weren't things we were aware of at the start, but as you work in it, you realise how much sort of damage this industry can do. So investing in things that are approaching it in the right way, plastic-free, paper packaging, whatever it may be relevant to the category, that's the direction that we'd like to go in.
Yeah, a million plastic bottles a day are produced. 1 million a day, and that's not even like bottle tops or anything like that. That's just literally a plastic bottle. And even if we were told by some great person called Sean Sutherland that even if all of the world and every individual and every corporate went down the route of saying no plastic and helping and improving what they're doing, we'd only ever be able to clear up 7% of the world plastic. So it's how we have to change radically what we're doing within our own lives and especially our businesses, right? That we have to really try and make sure that we are doing everything possible to get rid of plastic and rid of these things which are destroying our planet. And that's what Ed and I, and Kay, of course, we're all on that sort of road trying to do that.
Mm. Well, and I can up that stat: 5 billion drinking straws worth of plastic gum are chewed in the UK alone every year. So that's a crazy number. So that the more plant-based gum the more consumers that we can trade out of that single-use plastic into plant-based gum, the better for the planet. But just to kind of Ed's point around investment and what they look for, I think a lot of the hard work that we did when we were setting up the business initially have probably led to it becoming quite an attractive investment proposition. Things around supply chain. So making sure that we were working with a quality manufacturer that had the potential to scale. The research around the category and the consumer, big category, massive unmet consumer need. Again, that ticks a box for an investor. And then, a bit around the brand and the packaging, making sure that it's accessible, making sure that, you can convert that mainstream consumer into your alternative. I think putting those foundations in place early on, prior to even meeting Ed and Jamie, made for NUUD being quite an attractive investment proposition and really kind of painted the picture as to how we had the potential to scale.
Yeah, Keir, I think there's so much in that for listeners. The first thing is the fact I think everyone should just say yes to opportunities in the other days, because even if that no can lead to a yes. Obviously, you got the no on Dragon's Den, but serendipitously, Ed saw you on the program, and then you got the meeting and eventually the investment. So I think that's brilliant for listeners, just saying yes to everything in the early days. And then also, how much prep and work you'd done, so that when that meeting did arrive, it was almost hard. It was very hard for Jamie and Ed to say no to you. And I think that's brilliant. And obviously, you're super charismatic. You've got this kind of tenacity. So I think, there's so much in that. And Ed, you said that you would help KEIR work through problems. KEIR, has there been like a problem on your journey where you've had to lean on kittens, not dragons?
Oh, I don't think we've not had any kind of major problems. I think as a kind of entrepreneur and a challenger brand, you just get used to being uncomfortable and you get used to those problems on a day-to-day basis. So, if you're not wired in a way that you can be accepting of challenges and accepting of the fact that you're going to hit bumps in the road on as I say, almost daily basis, then I'd say maybe the startup world isn't for you. I can't pinpoint one, major problem that we've had. We have all the standard problems around supply chain, cost of goods going up, problems with retailers, etc., etc. And Ed and the team are amazingly supportive and helpful when things like that arise. But yeah, I'd say, I think one of your other listeners mentioned, one of your other guests mentioned around being on this linear scale between, devastation and euphoria constantly. And I think that's just the mindset of, the challenger world. And as I say, you just need to get comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think it was Emma from Lucky Saint. She said entrepreneurship is getting comfortable with the feeling that everything is falling apart and coming together at the same time. And I was like, yeah, that's
so good.
That's
great. I like that a lot. What is that one more time? Because I'm going to steal that. That's a great thing.
You got the sentiment from me at least.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that.
And what I want to talk about now, and as I get lots of messages from listeners who are just like, I'm too scared to eat. Like, it sounds silly, but like to even do like a sampling session or go and meet a buyer, or even raise investment and all these things. I'd love to talk about kind of fear, because outside looking in, you guys seem fearless. How do you guys personally navigate fear? Because I think there's so much in that for listeners. I don't know who wants to take it first.
I think I sometimes I'm so wary of when we talk about fear, because I think for people listening, it's very easy to fall back on something like that and go, God, I was so scared to do that, or I was fearful to do that. And Woody Allen says, there's a great quote from Woody Allen which says 50% of success is just turning up. And actually what happens is a lot of people just never turn up. So we all have these great ideas about, I don't know, cat's eyes in the road that can change this, or chewing gum that's going to be plastic free, or whatever it is, but you don't actually ever do it, and you go, I've had that idea. Actually, it takes you sort of should turn up. So I think the word fear should be changed. I find it sort of confusing when people talk about fear, because everyone has fearful is like your child dying. That's what fear is, right? I think actually, to sort of, you've got to just get rid of that when you're becoming an entrepreneur or a founder. You just got to not even have that conversation in your own mind, because it's not fearful. We're scared about what's going to happen and losing this and losing that and employment and all these different things. But I think the conversation around fear is an interesting one, but I think it should just be totally eradicated from any entrepreneur or founder's mind. Just don't even have that conversation, because there's no need for it.
Well, I think really bad advice.
That's so interesting. But then I suppose, KEIR, if you want to add some colour to it from your angle, like
I was just going to say, I think that's one of the great things about starting something from nothing. It's yours. Like, it was nothing. You're creating something. So things will go wrong along the way, but it's your baby, and it's not like you're losing someone else's house or you're wasting someone else's money, or it's something that you've created, so you can take full responsibility. And I think maybe that does create some fear down the line. I'm sure Ed and Jamie can talk with more authority on that. But I feel that because I've set NUUD up and I created this business, if things go wrong, I'm accountable for it. But that certainly doesn't kind of make me fearful. And in fact, actually being fearless is one of our brand values. I think it's super important as a challenger brand to be fearless in what you do. You're not going to make any headway. You're not going to, change consumer mindset or whatever without being fearless.
I think if you've already started the brand, that means you're not fearful anymore, really. That's the hardest thing, right? And actually, if you haven't started the brand, that's because fear's got in the way. So talking about fear is just like if you're running a business, talking about fear is just a nice thing to talk about. It's like, how do you get over fear? You're already over the fear. You've started the brand. So it's sort of just go, it's like asking, what happens when you die? It's just a fun thing to talk about. But actually, if you're a founder, an entrepreneur, a CEO, whatever it is, and you're doing it, once you've actually done it, that's the fear gone. It's the people who haven't even started are the ones who are fearful. So you just got to get rid of it. And that's what's going to stop you doing things is fear, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's probably coming through in what Jamie's saying, but I think we've always benefited from just total belief in the brand, and with that blind optimism, I think, for where we can take it and what we're going to do next. My advice, I think, would probably be to sort of build on what Jamie's saying, is to try and put yourself in a position and build some kind of structure around yourself where fear doesn't play a part. So, if things go wrong, so what? And I know now, in the position I'm in, that if we lost the business tomorrow, so what? We're still going to be okay. Nothing really bad can happen to my family, to my friends, to the people that I really hold dear and care about. Those are the things that I think are important, and I back myself to have some skills that I can then go on and do something else. I can get a job, whatever. I think if you're in a position where you put your life and your house and everything on the line, and it has to work, that probably is quite a scary place to be. So build the structure in a way that you're sort of managing that fear, I think. Does that make sense at all?
No, it's just so interesting getting all three of your perspectives on it. And I think, as to your point, Jamie, some of the listeners have actually crossed the chasm. They've started their business, but they're just petrified about a buyers meeting. And what someone said to Jimmy from Jimmy's Iced Coffee said to me on this podcast is, fear on that level is just excitement. It's just excitement.
Yeah, it's not fear.
Yeah, that's not. And what you said about fear is actually losing your bloody child. Like, that's fucking fear, right? So I think it's so interesting what you've said there.
It was changing the conversation in your head, right? Like, it's like with all these things, if you speak negatively towards yourself, you're really going to probably feel negative, right? So it's about changing that conversation in your mind. I remember, Ed, when we first started Candy Kittens, I would always be the nervous one. Do you think it's going to work? Always asking for a reassurance. Ed had no doubt it was going to work. And maybe in his mind, he was lying to himself. I don't know. It's him, right? But he always said, yeah, it's going to be fine. It's always going to be fine.
I think it is that so what question, right? So you're really, really nervous about a buyer. You're going to go to the meeting. What if they reject me? What if they tell me it's crap? What if they hate the idea? So what? So one person that you don't really know or care about has told you they don't like the thing that you love. Okay, well, we've all got different opinions, so what?
I've heard that a million.
Really trivialise it, really bring it down in your mind to, like, real rational level. This person said this about, okay, well, they can think what they want to think. I still think my idea is the best one that's ever existed. And I think having that sort of rational processing of things is really important to bring it back down to what it is. Ultimately, we're selling sweets, right? We're not sort of out here trying to save lives, and I think that also is helpful for us. You kind of bring it back down to the real world and don't get carried away.
And I'd add to that, like, mitigate the risk. So if, for example, you mentioned a buyer's meeting, if that's what you're getting nervous about, if that's what you're fearful of, mitigate that fear by booking in 5 more buyer's meetings, so that if one fails, you've got 4 more to make up for it. If that's what's giving you the fear, and I think you can do that across every facet of running a business.
No, definitely. Look, conscious of your guys' times, there's just 2 more kind of places I want to explore. So the first, and I don't know if you've read this book, but there's a book called The Obstacle is the Way, and I've started asking this question to all guests because it elicits quite interesting answers. But the book is all about, like, how the obstacle is the way forward, obviously. But I would love to know, and whoever wants to take this first, jump in. What has been, like, one seemingly insurmountable obstacle on your journey that actually paved the way forward? So, again, Ben Branson from Seedlip said he fell out of a window at a 21st birthday party and he lost his smell for 9 months. And then this developed this complete fascination with botanicals, and that's why that was kind of led to the genesis of Seedlip. I'd love to know what yours has been.
I think. Sorry to jump in. I think when I think I came from a big family and middle child, so always wanting to be heard. I suppose every video is me as being watch me. So you go to school, then I was pretty good at sport at school, I suppose. So that kind of gave me my sort of, I don't know, maybe it was validation. I don't know what it was, but maybe something like that. And then university kicked in, and at university you suddenly realise that you were a big fish in a very small pond, and then you're a small fish in a very large pond. And so then leaving university, it's about, okay, what can I do to really shine? Because if you're someone who wanted to shine, you kind of always want to do that. And I suddenly realised that actually to sort of go down the route is to probably start a business. How exciting would that be? And people would take interest in what you're doing. So I think mine is from the sheer desire to be wanted as a child in a family so big, that probably led me to starting a business, because I thought that would be exciting for everyone. I think, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of founders probably have the same thing, where they want to be heard. So they're like, oh God, wouldn't this be exciting if I did that? I think for me, that was probably it, in a sort of vulnerable sentence.
No, I interviewed Roger Wade, who's the founder of Box Park, and he basically said every entrepreneur sets up a business to overcome kind of some childhood insecurities, and I thought that was like super interesting. What about you, Keir, mate? What would you say is your obstacle being? And look, this could be life or it could be within business. It's like
I think the big obstacle for me was that first kind of interaction with being an entrepreneur, running a pub. You know, loads of moving parts, was very naive, didn't really know what we were doing, made loads of bad decisions, but actually, you know, managed to get away with it, you know, with our shirt on, as it were, and that kind of provided the launch pad for, you know, having the confidence to set up another business and go again. So, you know, it felt at the time like a huge failure. You know, the long-term plan was to buy one pub and buy 3 pubs and get to a decent sized group and sell it. And, you know, for a number of different reasons, that didn't work out. And that was my first foray into running my own business. So I suppose, you know, you have 2 options then. You say, right, you know, the entrepreneurial world isn't for me, running my own business isn't for me, I don't have the right skill set, I'm going back to work for, you know, a big blue chip and the safety net of a big corporation. Or you go, right, I've learnt loads there, love that, I'm going again. And that's kind of the route that I've taken.
I love that. And where was the pub, out of interest?
It was up in Newcastle. So yeah, my business partner and friend Elliot's from up there. Yeah, so that was the rationale. We were on the campus of Newcastle University, so it was great fun.
I see. And
probably
what about
too much fun?
Too much fun.
Probably, yeah.
And what would you say yours, Ed, is in terms of like the obstacle that actually paved the way forward?
I think it was all the people that thought we couldn't do it, for me. I think sort of trying to prove people wrong. You know, everybody that we spoke to, family, first of all, you know, our parents, what the hell are you talking about? You're going to launch a sweets company. You just graduated from university. You've got these great degrees. Why the hell would you do that? And then when you actually got over that obstacle, you start speaking to people in the industry, because we didn't have a clue what we were doing. And we go to speak to manufacturers and other salespeople from big confectionery companies that you look up to, and you realise that every single one of them also thought it was a bad idea, because they said, well, veganism's just a fad, that's sort of going to come and go. Nobody's interested in natural ingredients. And the worst thing you can possibly do, by the way, is put your sweets in a pouch, because you need to hang them up on the pegs in stores, and that's just not going to work. And nobody's ever going to pay £3 for a bag. So we decided to launch a natural pouch of sweets that wouldn't hang on the shelf in Waitrose for £3.50 a bag. And then sort of worked our way back from there, and then slowly but surely started to kind of optimize and prove people wrong. And I think that's the thing, that, you know, having something that on paper shouldn't work and then making it work is actually quite good fun. So for us, that's probably what we were doing, and really sort of going against the grain from day one, I think.
I love that, and I suppose all 3 of you have provided like ingredients for great lessons for listeners. I think with Jamie, you were saying about kind of these using your insecurities as a way forward. You know, Keir saying your knockbacks as a way forward, and then Ed, you know, almost using naysayers as fuel to keep you pushing forward.
But just quickly, I want to say that I also think with you, Ed, which is so interesting, I always find, is that, Ed, you were at a university where it was incredibly competitive. Everyone was setting up a new business, setting up something exciting and fresh. And so if you weren't doing that, you were the one left out. And I always find that's what you were having when you were at that sort of age of very, 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 you know, 18, 19, 20, 21, which is kind of rare, I think.
I was at Loughborough, and it's obviously known for its sport. And with that, you get this hyper competitive environment, and I think that's probably always suited me. You know, I like to win if I can, and I think that's something that Jamie and I have got in common. You know, we bring lots of different things to the party, but both enjoy that feeling of winning and being on top.
And you say all your mates were starting up businesses at that time. Like, was that add some colour to that?
there's lots of different things going on. I sort of, it's the old classic that gets rolled out a lot, but kind of surround yourself by people that you want to be or you want to be like, and feed off that energy. I think it's so important, your sort of immediate circle. And I was always lucky enough to be around guys that were doing some really great things. A friend of mine launched a really big student letting company, which on the surface sounds boring, but actually it's one of the brands that has probably inspired me most. He's taken a really boring sector and applied an amazing, sexy brand on top of that, and now has the largest student housing portfolio in the UK. And things like that, being around these people that are doing all sorts of different things, I think is really, really interesting. You learn little nuggets from here, and you kind of copy and paste bits that can work for you, and vice versa. And you sit down at night having a drink, and you're actually talking about those things rather than just chatting about last night's football scores or whatever. It's a bit more stimulating and a bit more interesting, and I think that helps you drive forward. When I sort of think and stop and think about my friends and the people that I know that and Jamie and I know, that are doing great things, you feel sometimes, wow, that's pretty cool. Actually, we've got all these mates out there who are doing these awesome things. But actually, it's probably not by accident. I think you sort of attract like-minded people as much as you sort of go out looking for them as well. So that, I think, is a big part of our success as well. That network around us that are pushing us forward. And again, you're always sort of looking over your shoulder and trying to do one better than your mate, and trying to beat them where you can as well. I think so. That
I think
helps
it's quite. It's quite
confidence.
infectious as well, isn't it? When you're around people that are clearly having so much fun and loving their day job and growing their baby, it kind of drives that behaviour in others. I've got loads of mates in my circle that have seen how much fun we're having at NUUD and how much I'm loving it, and have then gone on to start exploring the options for themselves. And I'm sure it's similar for Ed and Jamie.
No, definitely. And I mean, that's what was so fun about those drinks we did the other night, Keir. There's just so many brands. I was a bit drunk, but there's so many brands ploughing their way forward, and you learn a lot from them. Yeah. So final piece I want to explore now, guys, is it's almost like we've talked so much about these one sentences. So we said naivety is a superpower. I'm going to butcher it now, but the entrepreneurship is the feeling of everything coming together, falling apart at the same time. I would love for listeners, I think these one sentence can really kind of be so actionable and actually change their outlook of the week, etc. So I almost kind of want to do like a tuck shop of one sentence lessons that listeners could implement immediately. Other than obviously naivety is a power, what would yours be? I suppose we'll start with you, Keir, mate.
Well, I mean, people are going to think he's got shares in your podcast, but I think Perry from Big Fish is think big, dive deep, swim fast. For me, that epitomises the mindset of a challenger business and a startup business. I just think that is such a great phrase, and one that every startup should be applying to their day-to-day.
Completely. He's coming on again next week, actually. He's my favourite human. He's so funny.
Just an absolute hive of quality information.
Yeah. What about you, Ed or Jamie?
I'm normally pretty good at these things, but my mind has gone blank. I would definitely go back to that thing we said earlier, but the Rory Sutherland thing, which is never following logic. I think that's this world that we live in is so competitive, and everyone is trying to stand out. And so how do you stand out from the crowd? You just don't follow logic. If you're setting up a trainer company, look how fridges are marketed. Just do everything that you can do differently. So yeah, never follow logic, because if you follow logic, gets you back in the same place as everybody else, a place where you really don't want to be.
I love that. And finally, yourself, Ed.
I think sort of embrace the mistakes and lean into that, I think, is really, really important. I think a lot of people try and sort of navigate the startup world sort of as if they're carrying this box of really fragile glasses and are terrified of breaking anything. And actually, if you go out there like that, I don't think you're ever really going to get to the place you need to go. You need to really be bold, go a little bit gung-ho at the beginning and just try things. And you're bound to make mistakes, but that's okay. That's how you learn. And I think that one part actually of my degree that I did an industrial design degree, which unfortunately doesn't come in to that much use on a day-to-day basis. But one of the things we talked a lot about is this idea of testing and failing fast. So you test an idea, it fails, but you learn from that and you iterate and you go again. And I see so many people that sort of work up a campaign or work up a product for months and months and months or years and years, and they perfect and perfect and perfect internally, and then they launch and then it fails, and then all that time you've worked on it is completely wasted and thrown out the window. So the minimal viable product, get it out there, test it, learn what people think, and then go again. And I think that's, for us, one of the things that we've sort of always tried to do.
No, I love that. So obviously dream big, swim fast, dive deep, never follow logic and embrace mistakes. I think that's a nice little eclectic mix for people to go with. Guys, I've absolutely loved that. Genuinely really appreciate you coming on. I know listeners will absolutely love it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
buddy. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Right,
Cheers.
I'm just going to hit stop, and I just need to... this should upload.